The fluorescent lights of the Denver County Courthouse buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, unforgiving glow on the small figure huddled in the corner of the witness waiting room. Emma Rodriguez was 6 years old, with golden blonde hair that her grandmother had carefully braided that morning, and eyes the color of a cloudless Colorado sky. Those eyes, once sparkling with childhood wonder, now held a haunting emptiness that made grown adults look away in discomfort. In her lap, Emma clutched Mr. Hops, a worn stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed off and fur matted from countless nights of desperate hugging. Her tiny fingers gripped the toy so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. She hadn't let go of Mr. Hops since that night 9 months ago, the night that stole her voice and shattered her innocence. "Emma, sweetheart, do you want some juice?" Her grandmother, Rosa Rodriguez, asked softly in Spanish, kneeling beside the child with a weary tenderness born from months of patient, heartbreaking attempts to reach her. Rosa's dark eyes were ringed with purple shadows, testament to countless sleepless nights spent worrying about both her granddaughter and her daughter who still struggled with rehabilitation after the brutal attack. Emma didn't respond. She never did. She simply stared at the beige wall ahead, rocking slightly back and forth in a self-soothing motion that broke Rosa's heart every single time. Outside the waiting room, the courthouse thrummed with activity. Lawyers in expensive suits rushed past with briefcases. Court reporters balanced coffee cups and laptops. Security guards checked bags and waved metal detector wands. Life continued its normal rhythm for everyone except the little girl in room 104, whose entire world had stopped turning on February 14th, a Valentine's Day that became a nightmare. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morrison stood in the hallway, her back against the cold concrete wall, pressing her phone to her ear with barely controlled frustration. "Judge, she hasn't spoken a single word in 9 months. Not one. The child psychologist says forcing her to testify could cause permanent psychological damage, but without her testimony, we have nothing concrete. The forensics are circumstantial at best." On the other end of the line, Judge Patricia Holloway's tired voice crackled through. "What about the mother? Can she testify?" "Maria Rodriguez is still in physical therapy. The attack left her with severe head trauma and partial paralysis on her left side. Her memory of that night is fragmented at best. She can't identify the attacker with certainty." Rachel's voice dropped to an angry whisper. "Emma is our only eyewitness, and that monster knows it." That monster had a name: Vincent Viper Castellano, a 34-year-old career criminal with a scorpion tattoo winding up his left forearm and a rap sheet longer than most novels. He sat in the courtroom even now, flanked by his expensive defense attorney Marcus Webb, wearing a tailored suit and an expression of smug confidence. Castellano knew what everyone else knew. Without Emma's testimony, the prosecution's case would crumble like a house of cards in a windstorm. The evidence was damning but not definitive. A partial fingerprint on a broken window frame that could be explained away. DNA evidence contaminated by first responders. A witness who saw someone matching Castellano's description in the neighborhood but couldn't make a positive identification in the dark. It was circumstantial quicksand, looking solid on the surface, but unable to hold the weight of reasonable doubt. Everything hinged on Emma, a tiny 6-year-old girl who had been hiding behind her living room couch on that terrible night, watching through a narrow gap as a masked intruder beat her mother with a crowbar, demanding money from a safe that didn't exist. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Emma's child psychologist, had spent countless hours with the girl, using play therapy, art therapy, and every technique in her arsenal. The drawings Emma created told a horrifying story: dark figures with weapons, a woman lying on the floor surrounded by red crayon marks, a small girl hiding in shadows. But drawings couldn't convict. The justice system needed words, testimony, a voice. She saw his face when the mask slipped, Rachel had explained to the judge weeks earlier. For just a few seconds, when he bent down to rifle through Maria's purse, the ski mask rode up. Emma saw his face clearly. She saw the tattoo. She's the only person who can positively place Castellano at that scene. But how could they ask a traumatized child to speak when she'd built walls of silence to protect herself from the horror of that memory? In the waiting room, Rosa held her granddaughter close, humming a lullaby that Maria used to sing. "Mi niña hermosa," she whispered, her own voice breaking. "Beautiful girl. I wish I could take this pain from you. I wish I could give you back your voice." Emma's therapy sessions had revealed the depth of her trauma through drawings and nodding responses. She blamed herself for not helping her mother. She feared the masked man would return. She believed that if she spoke about what happened, she would somehow make it real again, relive it again, and this time maybe he would hurt her grandmother too. The courthouse clock ticked toward 2:00 p.m., the scheduled time for Judge Holloway to make her ruling on whether Emma could be compelled to testify. In the courtroom, Castellano whispered something to his lawyer and laughed. That laugh, cold and confident, echoed through the nearly empty gallery. Rachel Morrison gathered her files, straightened her shoulders, and prepared to face an impossible situation. How do you give voice to the voiceless? How do you demand justice without destroying the victim all over again? She didn't know that at that very moment, 3 floors below, Detective Sarah Chen was walking through the courthouse entrance with a partner who might just change everything. A partner with 4 legs, a gentle soul, and an extraordinary ability to reach children whom the human world had failed. The afternoon sun slanted through the high courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. In that interplay of light and dark, hope and despair, a miracle was about to unfold, though no one knew it yet. Emma clutched Mr. Hops tighter and closed her eyes, unaware that her silence was about to find the most unexpected voice imaginable. Detective Sarah Chen's boots clicked rhythmically against the polished marble floor of the Denver County Courthouse as she navigated the familiar corridors. Beside her, moving with the disciplined grace of a trained professional, padded Rex, an 80-pound German shepherd whose intelligent brown eyes missed nothing. His coat gleamed a rich mixture of black and tan, and despite his imposing size, there was something inherently gentle about the way he carried himself. "Easy boy," Sarah murmured, her hand resting lightly on Rex's shoulder as they approached the elevator. Rex's tail wagged once-twice, a subtle acknowledgement that he understood they were heading somewhere important. Sarah had been a detective for 12 years, but her partnership with Rex was only 3 years old, 3 years that had fundamentally changed how she viewed justice and healing. Rex wasn't trained to chase down suspects or sniff out drugs. He was a courthouse facility dog, certified in victim services, specially trained to provide comfort and emotional support to traumatized witnesses, particularly children navigating the terrifying maze of the legal system. The idea had come to Sarah at 3 a.m. on a sleepless night, 6 weeks after Emma Rodriguez had been scheduled to testify. Sarah had worked the case from the beginning, had been first on scene after the 911 call, had seen Maria Rodriguez's broken body on the blood-stained carpet, had found little Emma hiding behind the couch, mute with terror, Mr. Hops clutched to her chest. Sarah had tried everything to reach the child. She'd brought toys, spoken in gentle tones, even brought in female officers thinking Emma might feel safer with women. Nothing worked. Emma had retreated into a fortress of silence so complete that even her own grandmother couldn't reach her. But Sarah remembered something from a training seminar 2 years earlier, a presentation about facility dogs breaking through when humans couldn't. Children who wouldn't speak to therapists, police officers, or even their own parents sometimes found their voice with a dog. Dogs didn't judge. Dogs didn't push. Dogs simply existed in a space of unconditional acceptance that traumatized minds desperately needed. The elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, and Sarah's jaw tightened with determination. She'd fought for 2 weeks to get permission for this unorthodox approach, calling in favors, citing studies, presenting cases from other jurisdictions where facility dogs had made the impossible possible. Detective Chen, Rachel Morrison's voice cut through Sarah's thoughts. The prosecutor rushed toward them, her expression a mixture of desperate hope and professional skepticism. Please tell me you have good news. I have Rex, Sarah replied simply, and the German shepherd's ears perked at hearing his name. And I have studies from 17 states showing that courthouse facility dogs have successfully helped traumatized child witnesses testify. Kids who couldn't speak to humans, Rachel. Kids just like Emma. Rachel's eyes swept over Rex, taking in his alert but calm demeanor, the official service vest he wore, the way he sat perfectly still despite the chaos of the courthouse swirling around him. Marcus Webb is going to lose his mind. The defense will say we're manipulating the jury with a cute puppy. Rex is hardly a puppy, Sarah countered, a slight smile playing at her lips. And he won't be visible to the jury. The protocols are clear. The dog provides support to the witness only. Studies show that children testify more accurately and completely when they feel safe. Rex makes children feel safe. I don't know, Sarah. Judge Holloway is old school. She might see this as too unconventional. What's the alternative? Sarah's voice dropped low, urgent. We let Emma sit in that room, frozen in terror, unable to speak, while Castellano walks free. He'll do this again, Rachel. You know he will. Men like Vincent Castellano don't stop until someone stops them. Rachel bit her lip, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. The hearing starts in 20 minutes. I need to inform the judge and defense counsel about this development. Then let's do it. Sarah's hand rested protectively on Rex's head. But first, let me introduce Rex to Emma. No pressure, no expectations, just let them meet. 5 minutes later, Sarah stood outside room 104, where Emma and her grandmother waited. Through the small window in the door, she could see the little girl, still clutching that worn rabbit, still rocking gently back and forth in her protective rhythm. Rosa Rodriguez looked up as Sarah knocked softly and entered. Detective Chen, Rosa said, her voice heavy with resignation. Have you come to tell us it's time? Not yet, Mrs. Rodriguez. I've come to introduce Emma to someone special. Sarah gestured, and Rex padded into the room with measured, careful steps. This is Rex. He's a therapy dog who works with children in the courthouse. Rosa's eyes widened. A dog in the courthouse. Rex is specially trained, Sarah explained, kneeling down to Rex's level. He's helped other children who have been through trauma, I thought. I hoped Emma might like to meet him. Emma's rocking had stopped. Her blue eyes, which had been focused on nothing, suddenly locked onto Rex. The German shepherd, sensing the fragile attention directed at him, lowered himself into a sphinx position on the floor, making himself smaller, less threatening. Sarah held her breath. Rex remained perfectly still, his intelligent eyes fixed gently on Emma, waiting. 1 minute passed, then 2. The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the distant sounds of the courthouse and Rosa's quiet breathing. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emma's grip on Mr. Hops loosened, just slightly, just enough. It's okay, sweetheart, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Rex is very gentle, he likes children. Would you like to pet him? Emma didn't respond verbally. Sarah hadn't expected her to, but the little girl's body shifted. Her feet, which had been tucked under her, touched the floor. Her eyes never left Rex. The German shepherd's tail gave one slow, gentle wag. Emma stood up. Rosa gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. In 9 months, Emma had barely moved voluntarily, barely engaged with the world around her. Now she took 1 step forward, then another. Mr. Hops dangled from one hand as she approached the dog with the hesitant, hopeful movements of a child who had forgotten what safety felt like. Sarah remained frozen, afraid that any movement might break the spell. Emma reached out one small, trembling hand. Her fingers touched Rex's soft fur. The dog remained absolutely still, his breathing slow and even. Emma's hand moved from his head to his neck, then she sank to her knees beside him. What happened next made Sarah's throat tighten with emotion. Emma wrapped both arms around Rex's neck and pressed her face into his fur. And for the first time in 9 months, the little girl who had stopped speaking made a sound, a tiny, broken sob that came from somewhere deep in her traumatized soul. But then, as Rosa and Sarah watched with tears streaming down their faces, Emma's lips began to move against Rex's ear. She was whispering, actually whispering words that no one else could hear, but words nonetheless. The girl who couldn't speak to humans was speaking to a dog. The door burst open. Rachel Morrison stood in the doorway, her face pale. Sarah, Marcus Webb just filed an emergency motion. He's demanding Emma be declared incompetent to testify. Judge Holloway wants everyone in chambers in 5 minutes. He's trying to end this before it starts. Sarah looked at Emma, still clinging to Rex, still whispering secrets that only the dog could hear. "Let him try," Sarah said quietly, steel in her voice. "Because I think we just found Emma's voice. And Marcus Webb is about to discover that you can't silence hope, especially when it has 4 legs and a heart big enough to heal the broken." The small conference room adjacent to Judge Holloway's chambers felt like it was holding its breath. Sunlight filtered through the vertical blinds, creating striped patterns across the worn carpet where Emma sat cross-legged, Rex lying beside her with his massive head resting on her lap. Detective Sarah Chen stood near the wall, her trained eyes watching every subtle interaction between the child and her K-9 partner. Rosa Rodriguez sat in a folding chair, rosary beads clicking softly through her fingers as she prayed under her breath. Rachel Morrison reviewed her notes frantically, knowing that everything hinged on the next few minutes. Outside in the hallway, voices rose and fell as Marcus Webb argued his case to anyone who would listen. Emma's small fingers traced patterns in Rex's fur, moving with a gentleness that suggested she was drawing something only she could see. Her lips moved occasionally, forming silent words that disappeared into the dog's soft coat. Rex, for his part, remained utterly still except for the slow rise and fall of his breathing, a living, breathing anchor for a child lost at sea. "How long has she been like this?" Rachel asked quietly, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace in the room. 47 minutes, Sarah replied, checking her watch. "She hasn't let go of him since they met." "And you really think she's communicating with him?" Sarah moved closer, keeping her voice low. "Watch her mouth. Watch Rex's ears. Every time she whispers, his ears shift. He's listening, Rachel. And more importantly, Emma believes he's listening. For a traumatized child, that belief is everything." The door opened, and Judge Patricia Holloway entered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She'd been on the bench for 23 years and had seen almost everything the justice system could throw at her. But this case was different. This case haunted her dreams. "Don't get up," Judge Holloway said softly, though no one had moved. Her eyes found Emma immediately, and her stern judicial expression softened almost imperceptibly. "So this is the famous Rex I've been hearing about." "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." Marcus Webb's voice preceded him as he strode into the room, his expensive suit slightly rumpled from an afternoon of aggressive legal maneuvering. He stopped short when he saw Emma, actually sitting upright for the first time in months, engaged with the world instead of retreating from it. "Mr. Webb, sit down," Judge Holloway commanded, her voice brooking no argument. She pulled a chair close to where Emma sat, but not so close as to intrude. "Emma, my name is Judge Holloway. I'm a friend of Detective Chen's. Is it okay if I talk to Rex?" Emma's eyes flickered toward the judge, then back to Rex. Her hand tightened in his fur, but she didn't pull away. "Rex," Judge Holloway said, addressing the dog directly in a gentle tone that surprised everyone who knew her reputation for courtroom severity, "you seem like a very good boy. Do you like working with children?" Rex's tail thumped once against the carpet. Sarah Chen had coached the judge during their phone conversation earlier, explaining that sometimes children responded better when adults spoke to the dog rather than directly to them. It removed the pressure, created a safe distance from which the child could observe and perhaps participate. "I bet you're very smart," the judge continued. "Detective Chen tells me you've helped other children who were scared. Is that true?" Another tail thump. Emma's rocking had stopped completely now. She was listening. "Emma," Judge Holloway said, her voice impossibly soft for a woman who regularly commanded silence in packed courtrooms, "Rex is lucky to have you petting him. I can tell he likes you very much." For a long moment nothing happened. Marcus Webb shifted impatiently in his chair. Rosa's prayers grew quieter. Rachel held her breath. Then Emma leaned forward, her blonde braid falling across her shoulder, and whispered directly into Rex's ear. The words were inaudible to everyone else, but they could all see her lips forming syllables, could see the deliberate communication happening. Rex lifted his head slightly and looked at Sarah. His right ear twitched twice, then his left, signals that Sarah had trained him to use, though she'd never expected to rely on them like this. "What did she say?" Rachel asked urgently. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She asked if Rex would stay with her. She wants to know if he'll protect her. Marcus Webb stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is absurd. We're accepting the interpretation of dog signals as testimony. This is a mockery of the legal system." "Sit down, Mr. Webb," Judge Holloway said sharply. "Right now." "Judge, I must object." "I said sit down." The judge's voice cracked like a whip, and even Rex's ears flattened slightly at the sound. But then Judge Holloway's expression softened again as she turned back to Emma. "Sweetheart, Rex would very much like to stay with you. Would you like to tell Rex anything else?" Emma's small face tilted up toward the judge for the first time, and for a brief second their eyes met. In that moment, Judge Holloway saw what everyone else had seen. A child trapped inside her own terror, desperate for a way out but too afraid to take it. Emma looked back at Rex and began to whisper more urgently now, her words tumbling out in a steady stream of barely audible sound. Her hands moved through Rex's fur as she spoke, and the dog remained perfectly still, his focus entirely on the little girl who had chosen him as her confidant. Sarah knelt down near them, not close enough to intrude but close enough to hear. "She's telling him about that night," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "She's telling Rex what she saw." The room went completely silent except for Emma's whispered words and the distant sounds of the courthouse. Even Marcus Webb, for all his legal posturing, seemed moved by the sight of this tiny child finally releasing the poison of her memories to the only creature she felt safe enough to tell. "The couch," Sarah translated quietly as she picked up fragments of Emma's whispers. "She was behind the couch. She heard glass breaking, her mommy screaming, a man's voice angry, he wanted money." Emma's whispers grew more agitated, and Rex pressed closer to her, his warm presence a bulwark against the memories flooding back. "The mask slipped," Sarah continued, her hand pressed to her mouth. "She saw his face. She saw, oh God, she saw the tattoo. She's describing it right now, a scorpion on his left arm." Marcus Webb's face paled. He knew as well as everyone else in that room that Vincent Castellano had a scorpion tattoo on his left forearm. It was the detail that could lock his client away for decades. Emma suddenly stopped whispering. She pulled back from Rex slightly and looked around the room at all the adults watching her. Fear flickered across her face, and for a moment it seemed she might retreat back into her shell of silence. But then Rex did something extraordinary. He gently placed his paw on Emma's knee, a gesture he'd been trained to use for comfort, and made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Emma looked down at the paw, then back at Rex's face. And for the first time in 9 months, the corners of her mouth turned up in the tiniest smile. "Good boy," she whispered, and though the words were barely audible, everyone in the room heard them clearly. "Good boy." 2 words. The first words Emma Rodriguez had spoken to another living being since the night of the attack. Rosa Rodriguez burst into tears, her hand clutching her heart. Rachel Morrison grabbed Sarah's arm, both women crying openly. Even Judge Holloway wiped at her eyes discreetly. Marcus Webb stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "Your Honor, I need to speak with my client." "I'm sure you do," Judge Holloway replied coolly. She looked at Emma, still smiling at Rex, still patting his paw with her small hand. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. Detective Chen, Rex is officially assigned to this case. Emma, you and Rex are going to become good friends, I think." Emma nodded, a small but definite gesture of agreement. As they filed out of the conference room, Sarah overheard Marcus Webb on his phone, his voice tight with tension. "Vince, we need to talk about your options. Yes, I mean a plea deal. Everything just changed." Behind them, Emma walked slowly down the hallway, one hand holding her grandmother's, the other resting on Rex's back. The little girl who had been silent for 9 months had finally found her voice. She just needed the right listener. The Denver County Courthouse erupted into chaos the following morning. News vans lined the street, satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical flowers seeking sun. Reporters jostled for position on the courthouse steps, their cameras trained on every entering figure, hopping to catch a glimpse of the little girl who had spoken to a dog or the criminal whose fate hung in the balance. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Marcus Webb sat at the defense table, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something harder, more desperate. Beside him, Vincent Viper Castellano drummed his tattooed fingers on the polished wood surface, the scorpion on his forearm seeming to writhe with each movement. His smug expression from yesterday had vanished, replaced by barely concealed anxiety. "Your Honor, this is a travesty of justice." Marcus Webb's voice boomed through the courtroom as he stood to address Judge Holloway. His expensive suit was crisp, his silver cufflinks gleaming, but there was a wildness in his eyes that betrayed his desperation. "The prosecution wants to parade a dog through these hallowed halls, manipulate the jury's emotions, and claim it's somehow legitimate testimony." Rachel Morrison rose from the prosecution table, her own expression steely with determination. "Your Honor, the defense's characterization is both inaccurate and inflammatory. Rex is a certified courthouse facility dog, trained specifically to assist traumatized witnesses. He's not." "He's a prop," Webb interrupted, his voice rising. "A carefully calculated prop designed to elicit sympathy and prejudice the jury against my client. The moment that jury sees a cute dog comforting a child, any presumption of innocence vanishes." Judge Holloway banged her gavel once, the sharp crack silencing the murmurs rippling through the gallery. "Mr. Webb, you will not interrupt opposing counsel again. Ms. Morrison, continue." Rachel stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "Your Honor, Colorado law recognizes the use of facility dogs in courtroom proceedings under CRS Section 1610-402. 15 other states have similar provisions. The research is clear. Facility dogs do not prejudice juries. They simply allow traumatized witnesses, particularly children, to testify more accurately and completely." "Research conducted by whom?" Webb shot back. "Dog enthusiasts. This isn't science, Your Honor. This is sentiment masquerading as legal procedure." "Actually, Mr. Webb," Rachel replied coolly, producing a thick folder from her briefcase. "The research was conducted by the Department of Justice, the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, and 3 separate university psychology departments. I have the studies here if you'd like to review them." Webb's jaw tightened. He shuffled through papers on his table, pulling out his own documents. "I have studies too, Your Honor. Studies showing that children are highly suggestible. Studies proving that leading questions and emotional support can create false memories. How do we know this dog isn't being used to coach the witness?" "That's an outrageous accusation," Rachel's voice turned cold. Detective Chen has impeccable credentials, and Rex's training protocols are a matter of public record. Every interaction between Emma and Rex can be supervised, recorded, and scrutinized. By whom? Webb pressed. By you, by the detective who works for you. Forgive me if I find that less than reassuring. Judge Holloway leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. The courtroom had gone deathly quiet, every spectator hanging on the exchange. In the front row of the gallery, Rosa Rodriguez sat with her hands clasped in prayer, while Emma waited in a secure room with Sarah and Rex. Mr. Webb, Judge Holloway said carefully, what exactly are you asking for? Webb seized the moment. I'm asking that the court declare Emma Rodriguez incompetent to testify. Your Honor, this child has not spoken a coherent word to any human being in 9 months. She communicates through whispers to a dog, which are then interpreted by a police detective with a vested interest in securing a conviction. This isn't testimony, it's hearsay wrapped in fur. Your Honor, if I may, Rachel interjected. Yesterday, Emma spoke 2 clear words, good boy. Multiple witnesses heard them. She's not nonverbal, she's selectively mute due to trauma. There's a significant legal difference. 2 words, Webb scoffed. 2 words in 9 months does not make her a competent witness. She's 6 years old, severely traumatized, and by her own psychologist's admission, she's been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. She cannot distinguish fantasy from reality. She cannot handle cross-examination. And most importantly, Your Honor, she cannot swear an oath to tell the truth when she can barely speak at all. The courtroom buzzed with reaction. Reporters in the back furiously scribbled notes. A sketch artist captured Webb's impassioned stance, Rachel's determined expression, and Judge Holloway's thoughtful frown. Furthermore, Webb continued, sensing he had momentum, allowing a dog in the courtroom sets a dangerous precedent. What's next? Comfort cats, emotional support peacocks. Where does it end? The integrity of our judicial system depends on maintaining standards, not bending them every time a case becomes difficult. Difficult? Rachel's voice cut through like a blade. Emma Rodriguez watched her mother nearly beaten to death. She's been living in terror for 9 months, unable to process her trauma, unable to speak about the nightmare she witnessed. And you dare call seeking justice for her difficult? I call it impossible, Webb shot back. Because that's what the prosecution has, an impossible case built on circumstantial evidence and the whispered interpretations of a 6-year-old girl filtered through a police dog. If that's enough to convict in America, then we've abandoned the principles this system was built on. Enough, Judge Holloway's gavel cracked again. Both of you approach the bench now. Rachel and Marcus moved forward, their antagonism palpable even in their measured steps. Judge Holloway leaned forward, her voice low enough that only they could hear. I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. I have a traumatized child who is finally showing signs of recovery. I have a defendant with constitutional rights, and I have a legal system that needs to serve both justice and compassion. Ms. Morrison, your position. We request a competency evaluation, Your Honor, not by the defense's choice of expert or ours, by a court-appointed child forensic psychologist. Let an independent expert determine if Emma can testify reliably with Rex's support. If the expert says no, we'll respect that finding. Judge Holloway's eyes shifted to Webb. Mr. Webb. Webb hesitated. The offer was fair, perhaps too fair to reject without looking like he was afraid of the truth. The expert must be someone with no prior connection to this case, and the evaluation must include assessment of whether Rex's presence is coaching or supporting the witness. Agreed, Rachel said immediately. Fine, Judge Holloway announced, raising her voice so the courtroom could hear. I'm appointing Dr. Elizabeth Hart from the Colorado Child Advocacy Center to conduct a comprehensive competency evaluation. Dr. Hart is one of the foremost experts in child trauma and witness reliability in the country. She will assess Emma's ability to testify, with and without Rex present, and determine if the dog's presence enhances or compromises the integrity of potential testimony. Your Honor, Webb interjected, I still want Emma declared incompetent now before. Motion denied, Judge Holloway said flatly. We will have facts before we make decisions, Mr. Webb, not assumptions. Dr. Hart will have 1 week to complete her evaluation. We reconvene next Tuesday at 9 a.m. for her findings. Webb's face flushed red. Your Honor, my client has been in custody for. Your client is charged with aggravated assault, attempted murder, and home invasion, Mr. Webb. He'll remain in custody until trial or until you negotiate something different with Ms. Morrison. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell with finality. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Marcus Webb leaned close to Castellano. We need to talk settlement, if that evaluation comes back favorable to the prosecution. No deals, Castellano hissed, his scarred face twisting. That kid can't testify, she's broken. We wait this out. But as Webb watched Rachel Morrison gather her files with barely contained satisfaction, he wasn't so sure. Yesterday, Emma had spoken for the first time. Tomorrow, she might speak again. And the day after that, she might speak the words that would lock his client away forever. Outside the courtroom, Sarah Chen knelt beside Emma, Rex sitting between them. You did great today, Emma. You didn't even have to come into the courtroom and you still helped. Emma looked up at Sarah, then whispered something to Rex. Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. Rex says you're the bravest person he knows. Emma's small hand found Rex's collar. In 7 days, a doctor would decide her fate. But for now, for this moment, she had a friend who listened without judgment, protected without condition, and believed in her without doubt. The battle had only just begun. Dr. Elizabeth Hart arrived at the Denver County Courthouse on a gray Tuesday morning, carrying a worn leather briefcase that had accompanied her through 15 years of evaluating traumatized children. At 53, she had testified in over 200 cases, written 3 textbooks on child psychology and trauma, and earned a reputation for unflinching honesty that made both prosecutors and defense attorneys nervous. She was exactly what this case needed, someone who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or swayed by emotion. Judge Holloway's chambers had been transformed for the evaluation. The imposing desk had been pushed to the side, replaced by a small table with art supplies, toys, and puzzles. Soft lighting replaced the harsh fluorescence. A camera on a tripod recorded everything, ensuring transparency for both legal teams. Emma sat on a cushioned mat in the corner, Rex lying beside her like a furry guardian angel. She wore a yellow dress her grandmother had bought specially for today, and her blonde hair was pulled back with butterfly clips. But her eyes, those haunted blue eyes, still carried the weight of 9 months of silence. Dr. Hart entered quietly, her movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. She'd spent the previous week reviewing Emma's case file, her therapy records, the police reports, and watching the video from the conference room where Emma had first whispered to Rex. Now came the crucial part, seeing if that connection was genuine or, as the defense suggested, a coached performance. "Hello, Emma," Dr. Hart said softly, settling into a chair several feet away. "My name is Dr. Bate. That's a very handsome dog you have there." Emma's gaze flickered toward the doctor, then away. Her hand moved to Rex's fur, fingers curling into the familiar comfort. "I bet he's a good listener," Dr. Hart continued, pulling out a sketchpad. "I like to draw when I talk. Do you like to draw?" No response, but Emma's eyes followed the movement of Dr. Hart's pencil as she began sketching a simple house. Sarah Chen sat in the corner, present as Rex's handler, but instructed to remain silent unless the dog needed direction. Rosa Rodriguez waited outside with Rachel Morrison and Marcus Webb, all of them banned from the evaluation to prevent any appearance of coaching. Judge Holloway observed from behind her desk, her expression unreadable. For 20 minutes, Dr. Hart simply drew and talked quietly about neutral topics, dogs she'd known, houses she'd lived in, flowers and gardens. Emma remained silent, but her body language gradually relaxed. The rigid tension in her shoulders eased. Her breathing slowed. "Emma," Dr. Hart said eventually, "I understand you've been talking to Rex. That's wonderful. Dogs are excellent friends. They never judge us, do they?" Emma's head tilted slightly, not quite a nod but acknowledgement. "I wonder if you might tell Rex something for me," Dr. Hart suggested. "Could you ask him what his favorite thing about working with you is?" Emma leaned close to Rex's ear, her lips moving in that now familiar whisper. Rex's tail thumped twice against the mat. "What did he say?" Dr. Hart asked gently. Emma pulled back, looked at the doctor, and for a breathless moment it seemed she might speak directly to a human. But fear flickered across her face, and she shook her head, burying her face in Rex's neck. Dr. Hart made a note. "That's okay, sweetheart, take your time." The evaluation continued for another hour. Dr. Hart used dolls to have Emma show what happened to other little girls in scary situations. She asked Emma to draw pictures. She had Emma arrange toy furniture to show where people were in rooms. And through it all, Emma communicated, sometimes through gestures, sometimes through drawings, and most frequently through whispered conversations with Rex that Sarah carefully translated. The pattern was consistent. When questions were simple and indirect, Emma could nod or shake her head. When they required explanation, she whispered to Rex. When they touched too close to the trauma, she shut down completely, clinging to the dog until the panic passed. "Emma," Dr. Hart said finally, "I'm going to ask Rex a question, and I'd like you to help him answer if you can. Is that okay?" A small nod. "Rex," Dr. Hart addressed the dog directly, "did Emma see something scary a while ago?" Emma whispered urgently to Rex. Sarah watched the dog's ear movements. "She says yes, she saw a bad man." "Did this bad man hurt someone Emma loves?" Another whispered consultation. "Her mommy. He hurt her mommy really bad." Dr. Hart's voice remained gentle, clinical. Would Emma be able to tell people what she saw if Rex was with her? Emma's whisper was longer this time, more agitated. Rex pressed closer to her and she wrapped both arms around him. Sarah waited for the communication to finish. She says she's scared the bad man will come back, but Rex promises to protect her. She says if Rex is there, she can try." "If Rex is there, she can try," Dr. Hart repeated, making detailed notes. Judge Holloway leaned forward, her hands clasped. "Dr. Hart, in your professional opinion, is Rex coaching this child or supporting her?" Dr. Hart set down her pen and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, I've evaluated hundreds of traumatized children. I've seen genuine selective mutism and I've seen coach testimony. This is absolutely genuine. Emma has severe post-traumatic stress disorder manifesting as selective mutism, specifically, an inability to speak about her trauma to humans because humans are associated with the threat. The perpetrator was human. The victim was human. The terror was caused by human action." "But she can speak to the dog," Judge Holloway observed. "Exactly. Rex represents a safe harbor. He's living proof that not all beings with power over her will hurt her. More importantly, he's a transitional object, a bridge between her internal world of trauma and the external world she needs to rejoin." Dr. Hart consulted her notes. Emma's memories are intact. Her sequencing is accurate. Her details are consistent with the evidence. She's not confabulating or fantasizing. She's simply terrified. Marcus Webb, who'd been allowed into chambers for this final assessment, spoke up. "But doctor, how can we trust that the dog isn't influencing her responses? How do we know Detective Chen isn't using Rex to feed Emma information?" Dr. Hart fixed him with a withering stare. "Mr. Webb, I've spent the last week reviewing this case from every angle, specifically looking for coaching. I interviewed Detective Chen separately. I reviewed all of Rex's training certifications. I even had Emma evaluated without Rex present for comparison. And Webb pressed. Without Rex, Emma regresses to complete non-responsiveness. With Rex, she's able to access traumatic memories and communicate them. The dog isn't feeding her information. He's allowing her to access information she already has but is too terrified to share. There's a profound difference. Judge Holloway stood and walked to where Emma sat with Rex. The little girl looked up at the judge, her expression wary but not quite as terrified as it had been a week ago. "Emma," the judge said softly, kneeling down to the child's level, "if I let Rex stay with you in the big courtroom with all the people there, do you think you could tell everyone what you saw that night? You could whisper to Rex just like you do now, and Detective Chen would help people understand." Emma's whisper to Rex was so quiet even Sarah had to lean in to catch fragments. The German Shepherd's responses were subtle, a shift of his ears, a slight movement of his head, the placement of his paw on Emma's leg. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. She says she's scared, but Rex told her that brave doesn't mean not being scared. Brave means being scared but doing the right thing anyway. She says she'll try if Rex promises not to leave her. Judge Holloway looked at Dr. Hart. "Your professional recommendation." Dr. Hart closed her evaluation folder with finality. "Emma Rodriguez is competent to testify with appropriate accommodations. Specifically, she requires Rex's presence, a screen to block direct visual contact with the defendant and regular breaks. Her method of communication is unusual but reliable. She understands the difference between truth and lies. I tested that extensively. She understands the consequences of testimony. And most importantly, she wants justice for her mother." Webb's face had gone pale. "Your Honor, I strongly object." "Your objection is noted, Mr. Webb." Judge Holloway stood, her decision made. Emma Rodriguez will be permitted to testify with Rex present. Detective Chen will translate her communications. The defense will have every opportunity to cross-examine both the witness and the translation method. We proceed to trial next Monday. Your Honor, please. This hearing is concluded. As Dr. Hart packed her briefcase, she paused beside Emma. "You're a very brave girl," she said quietly. "Rex is lucky to have you." Emma looked up at the doctor, and for just a moment the corners of her mouth lifted in the ghost of a smile. Then she whispered something to Rex that made his tail wag enthusiastically. Sarah smiled through her tears. "She says Rex is her hero, and heroes help other heroes." Outside the courthouse, news crews reported breaking developments. Inside, Marcus Webb frantically called his client with news that would change everything. The battle had reached its turning point. In 6 days, a little girl would walk into a courtroom with a dog by her side and speak truth to power in the most unexpected way imaginable. The real fight was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Courtroom 4B had been transformed overnight. A small screened area erected near the witness stand, positioned so the jury could see Detective Chen, but not Emma directly. The screen would shield the child from having to face Vincent Castellano, while still allowing the jury to assess the credibility of the testimony through Sarah's translations and Rex's presence. The gallery was packed. Reporters filled every available seat, their notebooks ready, phones silenced. Court sketch artists positioned themselves for optimal views. Rosa Rodriguez sat in the front row, her rosary beads wrapped so tightly around her fingers that her knuckles had turned white. At the defense table, Vincent Castellano sat rigid, his tattooed hands folded on the polished wood. The scorpion on his left forearm seemed to pulse under the fluorescent lights. Marcus Webb whispered final instructions to his client, though both men knew their options had narrowed dramatically since Dr. Hart's evaluation. Rachel Morrison organized her notes with meticulous care, but her hands trembled slightly. Everything came down to this. Everything depended on whether a 6-year-old girl and a therapy dog could accomplish what months of investigation and evidence gathering could not: place Castellano at the scene with absolute certainty. Judge Holloway entered and everyone rose. "Be seated," she commanded, her voice carrying the gravity of the moment. "This is going to be an unusual proceeding, and I expect absolute silence and respect. Anyone who disrupts will be removed immediately. Bailiff, please bring in our witness." The courtroom doors opened, and the collective intake of breath was audible. Emma walked slowly down the center aisle, her small hand gripping Rex's service harness. She wore a simple blue dress, and her blonde hair fell loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed firmly on the German shepherd beside her, drawing strength from his calm, steady presence. Detective Sarah Chen walked on Emma's other side, her hand resting lightly on the child's shoulder. Every eye followed their progress. The sketch artist's hands flew across their pads. In the gallery, grown men wiped away tears before the testimony even began. Emma didn't look at the jury. She didn't look at the judge. She certainly didn't look toward where Castellano sat. She kept her gaze locked on Rex as they reached the screened area, where cushions had been placed on the floor and a small microphone positioned nearby. "Emma," Judge Holloway said gently, once the child had settled with Rex, "do you understand why you're here today?" Emma nodded, her hand buried in Rex's fur. "Do you understand that you need to tell the truth about what you saw?" Another nod. "Do you know the difference between the truth and a lie?" Emma leaned close to Rex's ear, whispered, then looked at Sarah. The detective knelt beside them, listening to both child and dog. "She says truth is what really happened. Lies are made-up stories. Her mommy taught her that lying is wrong." Judge Holloway nodded. "Thank you, Emma. Ms. Morrison, you may proceed." Rachel Morrison stood, her heart hammering. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times, but nothing could truly prepare her for the reality of it. "Emma, I'm going to ask you some questions. You can answer however feels comfortable. You can whisper to Rex, nod, shake your head, or use any way that feels right. Is that okay?" Emma nodded, pressing closer to Rex. "Can you tell us about February 14th? That was 9 months ago, on Valentine's Day." Emma's entire body tensed. Her fingers tightened in Rex's fur. For a long moment she didn't move, and Rachel feared she might shut down completely. But then Rex shifted, pressing his warm body against the little girl, and Emma leaned into him, whispering urgently. Sarah translated, her voice steady despite the emotion evident on her face. "She says it was nighttime. She was supposed to be asleep, but she came downstairs because she heard her mommy talking on the phone. She wanted to show her mommy a picture she'd drawn, a Valentine's heart." "What happened when you came downstairs, Emma?" More whispers, longer this time. Emma's breathing grew rapid, but Rex remained calm, anchoring her to the present. She heard a loud crash. The big window in the living room broke, glass everywhere. Her mommy screamed and told her to hide. "Where did you hide?" "Behind the big couch, the blue one with flowers." Emma's whisper was barely audible, but the microphone caught fragments. Sarah filled in the rest based on Rex's signals and Emma's gestures. "What did you see from behind the couch?" Emma's whisper became frantic, distressed. She clutched Rex with both hands, and the dog remained perfectly still, letting her hold onto him like a lifeline. Sarah's voice cracked as she translated. "A man, wearing all black and a mask over his face. Scary mask. He had something in his hand. She says it looked like a big stick, but metal and heavy." "What did the man do?" The courtroom was so silent that people could hear their own heartbeats. Emma whispered, stopped, buried her face in Rex's fur, then continued. The story emerged in painful fragments. The masked man demanding money, Maria Rodriguez pleading that she didn't have any, the sickening sounds of violence, Emma's terror as she watched her mother fall. "Emma," Rachel said gently, "this is important. Did you see the man's face?" A long pause. Emma shook her head against Rex's neck. but then she whispered something that made Sarah's eyes widen. She says the mask slipped. When he bent down to look through her mommy's purse, the mask rode up. Sarah's hands trembled as Rex signaled more information. She saw his chin, his neck, and his arm, his left arm, when his sleeve pulled back. Rachel felt electricity shoot through her. "What did you see on his arm, Emma?" Emma pulled away from Rex just enough to make eye contact with Sarah. She held up her own left arm and pointed to her forearm. Then she whispered urgently, her small voice cracking with remembered terror. "A scorpion," Sarah translated, her voice ringing clear through the courtroom. "A black scorpion tattoo crawling up his arm. She says she remembers because it looked mean and scary, just like the man." A ripple of reaction spread through the gallery. Jurors leaned forward. Marcus Webb's pen clattered to the table. Rachel pressed on. "Emma, did you see anything else that might help identify this man?" More whispers. He had a deep voice, rough. He kept saying bad words, and he had a scar. She saw it when the mask slipped, a white scar on his chin shaped like a crescent moon. Vincent Castellano had exactly such a scar. 3 people in the gallery gasped. They could see it from where they sat. "Emma, this is very important." Rachel moved closer to the screen, though she still couldn't see the child directly. "After that night, have you ever seen the man who hurt your mommy?" Emma's whisper stopped. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Rex shifted, nuzzling Emma's hand. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Every person in the courtroom held their breath. Then Emma did something no one expected. She stood up. Still gripping Rex's collar with one hand, she walked to the edge of the screen. Sarah quickly stood beside her, ready to intervene if needed. Emma's blue eyes scanned the courtroom, past the jury box, past the prosecutor's table, until they landed on the defense table. On Vincent Castellano. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and in that moment everyone saw what Emma saw, the man from her nightmares, the monster who'd stolen her voice, sitting 20 feet away in an expensive suit. Castellano's face went white. He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable under the unwavering gaze of this tiny child he'd thought he'd silenced forever. Emma's grip on Rex tightened. Her chest heaved with rapid breaths. Her whole body trembled, but she didn't look away. She didn't run. She didn't hide. And when she leaned down to whisper to Rex this time, her words were louder than before. Loud enough that the microphone caught them. Loud enough that the jury heard them. Loud enough that they would echo through this courtroom and through every news broadcast in America by nightfall. "That's him," Emma whispered, her voice small but clear and absolutely certain. "That's the bad man. That's the man with the scorpion." The courtroom exploded in chaos. Reporters frantically typed. Jurors gasped. Rosa Rodriguez sobbed openly. Marcus Webb jumped to his feet, objecting loudly, but his words were drowned in the commotion. Judge Holloway's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order, order in this court." But the damage, or perhaps the justice, was done. Emma had identified her attacker, not through whispers translated by intermediaries, but through her own voice, witnessed by everyone present. Rachel Morrison felt tears streaming down her face. Sarah Chen pulled Emma into a protective embrace as the child finally broke down, months of terror and trauma releasing in racking sobs against Rex's fur. And Vincent Castellano sat frozen at the defense table, watching his confidence, his smugness, and his freedom crumble before his eyes. The trial had just taken a turn no one could have predicted. Judge Holloway called a 15-minute recess to restore order to the chaos that had engulfed courtroom 4B. Emma was led back to the witness waiting room, still clinging to Rex, her small body trembling from the emotional earthquake of confronting her nightmare face to face. Sarah Chen held the child close, whispering reassurances while Rex pressed his warm body against both of them. In the hallway outside, Marcus Webb cornered Vincent Castellano, his voice a harsh whisper. "Did you see that? She identified you in front of 12 jurors. The scorpion tattoo, the scar, everything matches. We need to talk about a plea deal right now. Castellano's face had taken on a grayish tinge, sweat beading on his forehead despite the courthouse's air conditioning. That kid's been coached. It's all a setup. Keep fighting. She wasn't coached, Webb hissed. Did you see her face? That was real terror, real recognition. The jury saw it too, and they believed every second of it. I don't care what they... You should care, Webb interrupted sharply. Because in about 10 minutes I have to cross-examine a traumatized 6-year-old who just pointed at you in open court. And if I push too hard, that jury will hate you even more than they already do. Your only play now is damage control. Rachel Morrison stood with Rosa Rodriguez, both women struggling to compose themselves. She spoke, Rosa kept repeating through tears. Did you hear? My Emma spoke. She said his name, she identified him. She was incredible, Rachel agreed, wiping her own eyes. But Marcus Webb still has the right to cross-examine. We need to prepare Emma for what's coming. Back in the waiting room, Dr. Elizabeth Hart had been summoned. She knelt beside Emma, speaking in her calm, clinical voice. Emma, you did something very brave out there. Very brave. But now the other lawyer, not Ms. Morrison, but Mr. Webb, he needs to ask you some questions too. It's his job. Do you understand? Emma nodded, her face still buried in Rex's fur. He might ask questions that seem confusing or even mean, but he's not allowed to hurt you, and Rex will be right there the whole time. Detective Chen will be there. Judge Holloway will protect you. Can you try? Emma lifted her head, her blue eyes red-rimmed from crying. She whispered to Rex, a longer conversation than usual. Sarah listened carefully. She says she's scared, but she wants the bad man to go away forever. She wants her mommy to be safe. She'll try. Dr. Hart squeezed Emma's hand. That's all anyone can ask, sweetheart. Just tell the truth and we'll all be here with you. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The initial shock had settled into grim determination. The jurors sat with faces of stone, several stealing glances at Castellano with undisguised contempt. Emma returned to her screened area with Rex, her small shoulders squared with newfound courage that broke hearts throughout the gallery. Marcus Webb approached the screen slowly, his usual aggressive courtroom demeanor replaced by something softer, more careful. He knew he was walking a tightrope, challenge the witness too hard and lose the jury completely, accept everything she said and lose his client. Emma, he began gently, my name is Mr. Webb. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? Emma didn't respond, but she didn't retreat either. Her hand remained steady in Rex's fur. Emma, that night was a long time ago, wasn't it? 9 months. Emma whispered to Rex. Sarah translated, yes. And it was dark in your house, wasn't it? Some lights were on, the kitchen light, the lamp by the couch. Webb consulted his notes. But you were scared, right? Very scared. Emma's whisper was barely audible. Yes, very scared. When we're scared, sometimes our memories get confused. Sometimes we think we saw things that maybe we didn't see clearly. Does that make sense? Emma pulled back from Rex, and for the first time, she looked directly toward where Webb's voice was coming from. She didn't whisper. She didn't nod. She stared at the screen separating them with an intensity that made the veteran defense attorney take an involuntary step backward. Then Emma stood up, still holding Rex's collar. Sarah stood quickly beside her, uncertain what was happening. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Rachel Morrison held her breath. Emma walked to the very edge of the screen, to the gap where she could see past it into the main courtroom. Her eyes found Castellano immediately, locked onto him with the focused memory of trauma that never forgets, never forgives. Her chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. Her whole body shook. Rex pressed against her leg, offering support without forcing her to stop. This was Emma's choice, Emma's moment, Emma's voice to use or not use. Castellano stared back at the little girl, and for just a second, His mask of indifference cracked. He saw himself reflected in her terrified eyes, saw himself as the monster he'd become, the nightmare that haunted her dreams. Emma raised her right hand, her finger trembling but pointing directly, unmistakably, at Vincent Castellano. And then, with every ounce of courage her 6-year-old heart could summon, she spoke. Not a whisper, not words filtered through Rex and translated by Sarah. Her own voice, clear, strong, unwavering, 4 words that would be quoted in legal journals, news articles, and courtrooms across America for years to come. That's him, he heard him, why mommy. The words exploded through the courtroom like a thunderclap. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, sacred. Emma's voice, the voice that had been stolen by trauma, locked away by terror, silent for 9 agonizing months, had finally broken free. Not with a whisper, not with uncertainty, but with the clarion call of truth that no amount of legal maneuvering could obscure. Castellano's face went from gray to white. His hands, previously folded calmly on the table, began to shake. He tried to maintain eye contact with Emma but couldn't. He looked away first, defeated by the unwavering gaze of the child he'd tried to silence. Marcus Webb stood frozen, his cross-examination destroyed before it could begin. What could he say now? How could he suggest false memory or coaching when Emma had just spoken directly, independently, without any intermediary? The jury sat transfixed. 3 jurors were crying openly. The foreman had his hand pressed to his mouth, his eyes glistening. They had just witnessed something none of them would ever forget, a child finding her voice in the pursuit of justice. Judge Holloway's own eyes were wet as she struggled to maintain judicial composure. Mr. Webb, do you have further questions for this witness? Webb looked at his client, saw the defeat written across Castellano's face, and made a decision. No, Your Honor, no further questions. Ms. Morrison, redirect. Rachel stood, her voice thick with emotion. Just one question, Your Honor. She stepped toward the screen. Emma, are you absolutely certain that the man sitting at that table is the same man who hurt your mother? Emma nodded, still staring at Castellano. And then, as if those 4 words had broken a dam inside her, more words came tumbling out, still quiet, still scared, but undeniably present. He wore a black mask. He had mean eyes. He hit my mommy with a metal stick. She fell down and there was blood. I was so scared. I hid behind the couch and I saw his tattoo when he bent down. A scorpion. Black scorpion, that's him. I promise it's him. I saw him. The words flowed like water after a drought, each sentence a revelation, a healing, a reclamation of the voice that trauma had stolen. Emma suddenly looked down at Rex, her courage momentarily faltering. The German shepherd looked up at her with those wise, gentle eyes, and she dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around him. Thank you, Rex, she whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. Thank you for helping me be brave. Judge Holloway's gavel fell gently. The witness is excused. This court stands in recess for 30 minutes. As Sarah led Emma from the courtroom, still clinging to Rex, the little girl passed close to the defense table. Castellano couldn't help himself. He glanced at her one final time. Emma stopped, looked directly at him, and said in a clear, steady voice, "You're the bad man, and bad men should go to jail." Then she walked out, her head held higher than it had been in 9 months, Rex padding proudly beside her. In the hallway, Marcus Webb pulled his client aside. "We're done. The plea deal is your only option now." For the first time since his arrest, Vincent Castellano's confidence completely shattered. What are they offering? 18 years, and you should take it before they change their minds. Inside the courtroom, the jury deliberated for only 43 minutes before returning a preliminary advisory that would influence the plea negotiations. They believed Emma Rodriguez completely, and they wanted justice. The girl who couldn't speak had just spoken the truth that would change everything. 3 months had passed since that extraordinary day in courtroom 4B, when a tiny girl's 4 words had shattered 9 months of silence and brought a dangerous man to justice. The Colorado winter had given way to spring, and with it came a season of renewal that seemed to mirror Emma Rodriguez's own journey back to life. Vincent Viper Castellano had accepted the plea deal within 24 hours of Emma's testimony. 18 years in Colorado State Penitentiary for aggravated assault, attempted murder, and home invasion. No trial, no appeals, just the quiet acceptance of a man who'd finally met someone braver than he was cruel. Rachel Morrison had stood before the press on the courthouse steps, announcing the resolution. Emma Rodriguez will not have to testify again. She's been through enough. Today, justice was served not despite her trauma, but because she found the courage to face it, with a very special friend by her side. Now, on a bright April morning, Emma sat in Riverside Park with Rex, both of them basking in the warm sunshine that promised summer was coming. The German Shepherd lay contentedly while Emma read aloud from a picture book, her voice clear and confident. Every few sentences, she'd pause to show Rex the illustrations, and he'd thump his tail appreciatively. And the brave dog told the little girl, "You are stronger than you know," Emma read, her finger tracing the words. She looked at Rex with a smile that came easily now. "That's like you, Rex. You told me I was brave even when I didn't feel brave." Sarah Chen sat on a nearby bench, watching the interaction with the pride of a parent watching their child take first steps. In 3 months, Emma had transformed from a silent, traumatized child into a talkative 6-year-old who still had difficult days but was genuinely healing. She attended regular therapy sessions, but increasingly, they focused on moving forward rather than surviving the past. "You know what, Rex?" Emma continued, setting down her book. "I'm writing my own book. Dr. Bates says it's good to write about feelings. I'm calling it Rex, the Dog Who Listened. Want to hear some of it?" Rex's tail wagged enthusiastically. Emma pulled a notebook from her backpack, bright purple with stickers of dogs and butterflies covering the front. She opened it carefully, treating it like the treasure it was. Chapter 1, The Girl Who Lost Her Voice, she began reading in her storytelling voice. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who saw something very scary. She was so scared that her words got stuck inside her like they were frozen. She tried to talk, but nothing came out, until one day she met a special dog named Rex. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, remembering the silent, hollow-eyed child from 9 months ago. Emma's grandmother, Rosa, approached the bench carrying 2 coffee cups and a juice box. "She's reading to him again," Rosa said softly, settling beside Sarah. "Every day she reads to Rex, sometimes her own stories, sometimes library books. She says Rex is her best listener." "He is," Sarah agreed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Rex has helped a lot of children, but Emma, she's special. They have something unique." Rosa watched her granddaughter with eyes that held both lingering pain and growing hope. "Maria comes home next week. The rehabilitation center says she's made remarkable progress. She's been walking with a cane now, and her speech is almost completely recovered." "That's wonderful news." Emma talks about it constantly. "Mommy's coming home, Mommy's coming home. After everything, we're going to be a family again." Rosa's voice broke. "Detective Chen, I don't know how to thank you. You and Rex gave us back our Emma." Sarah shook her head. "Emma did the hard work herself. We just gave her a safe space to find her courage." Across the park, Emma had finished reading her chapter and was now engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with Rex. She whispered to him occasionally. Old habits died hard, but increasingly she spoke aloud, her confidence building with each passing day. "Rex says I should add a part about how scary the courtroom was," Emma announced, looking back at Sarah and her grandmother. "But also how you were there, Detective Chen, and you kept me safe. Rex says you're a hero too." Sarah walked over and knelt beside them. "Rex is very wise, but Emma, you're the real hero in this story. You know that, right?" Emma considered this carefully, her small face serious. Dr. Bates says that being a hero doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. I was really, really scared in that courtroom. I know you were, sweetheart. But Rex was there, and you were there, and Grandma was there, and I remembered what Mommy always said, that truth is important, that telling the truth even when it's hard is what makes us strong. Emma's hand rested on Rex's head. So I told the truth, and now the bad man can't hurt anyone else. The simplicity of her moral universe, the clear division between truth and lies, safety and danger, good and bad, was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Emma had seen the worst of humanity and somehow emerged believing in the best of it. Emma, Sarah said carefully, you know that Rex and I have to go back to work at the courthouse soon. We might help other children who need us, just like we helped you. Emma's face fell for just a moment, but then she nodded with a maturity beyond her years. Other kids who lost their voices. Maybe, or kids who are scared to talk about what happened to them. Emma thought about this, then brightened. You should show them my book when it's done. Tell them about how Rex helped me find my voice. Tell them that even though it's scary, they can be brave too. That's a wonderful idea. Would you like to help us sometimes? Maybe come read your book to other children who need to hear it. Emma's eyes widened with excitement. Really? I could help. Absolutely. Heroes help other heroes, right? That's what you told Rex. The little girl beamed, already imagining the possibilities. Her trauma hadn't disappeared. It might never fully disappear. But she was learning to live alongside it, to transform it into something purposeful, something healing. 6 weeks later, the Colorado State Legislature passed the Emma's Law, expanding courthouse facility dog programs throughout the state and allocating funding for training more dogs like Rex. News outlets across the nation picked up the story. Sarah and Rex were invited to speak at conferences, to train other K-9 units, to share their methodology with jurisdictions hungry to replicate their success. But the most important moment came on a sunny Saturday afternoon in June. Emma stood on her front porch, dressed in her favorite yellow sundress, practically vibrating with excitement. A car pulled into the driveway, and before it had fully stopped, Emma was running toward it. Mommy, Mommy! Maria Rodriguez emerged slowly from the passenger seat, leaning heavily on her cane. Her recovery had been long and painful. She still bore scars from that terrible night, both visible and invisible. But when she saw her daughter racing toward her, her face lit up with a joy so pure it seemed to radiate light. Emma crashed into her mother's arms, nearly knocking them both over. Maria dropped her cane and wrapped her daughter in a fierce embrace, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. Mi amor, mi vida, Maria whispered, kissing Emma's hair. I missed you so much. I found my voice, Mommy, Emma said, pulling back to look at her mother's face. I was quiet for so long, but I found it again, and I told everyone what happened. I helped put the bad man in jail. I know, baby, I'm so proud of you, so incredibly proud. And Mommy, I have so much to tell you. I wrote a book. Well, I'm still writing it. It's about Rex. He's my friend, the dog who helped me, and I can read now real chapter books, and I want to help other kids who are scared. And Maria laughed through her tears. Slow down, sweetheart. We have all the time in the world now. Tell me everything. Rosa stood on the porch, her own face wet with tears of gratitude. Sarah Chen, who had driven Maria home from the rehabilitation center with Rex in the back seat, opened the car door to let the German shepherd out. Rex padded over to where Emma and Maria embraced. Emma immediately pulled away from her mother long enough to throw her arms around the dog. Mommy, this is Rex. He's the best dog in the whole world. He helped me when I couldn't talk. He listened to all my secrets and kept me safe and made me brave. Maria knelt carefully, her mobility still limited, and looked into Rex's intelligent eyes. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you for protecting my daughter when I couldn't. Thank you for giving her back her voice. Rex, in that mysterious way that therapy dogs have of understanding human emotion, gently licked Maria's hand. Emma took her mother's hand and Rex's collar. Come on, Mommy. Let me show you my room. I have so many pictures to show you. And my book. You have to read my book. As Emma led her mother toward the house, chattering constantly about everything she'd experienced, Sarah stood beside Rosa on the porch. She's going to be okay, Rosa said quietly. They're both going to be okay. Yes, Sarah agreed, they are. That evening, as the sun set over Denver, Emma sat between her mother and grandmother on the couch, the same couch she'd hidden behind 9 months earlier. But tonight held no fear, only love and healing and the promise of tomorrows that would get progressively brighter. Rex lay at their feet, his job complete but his friendship eternal. Emma opened her purple notebook and began reading her story aloud, her voice strong and clear, and absolutely her own. Rex, the Dog Who Listened by Emma Rodriguez. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Lost Her Voice. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who saw something very scary. She was so scared that her words got stuck inside her, like they were frozen. But then she met a special dog who taught her that brave doesn't mean not being scared. Brave means being scared but doing the right thing anyway. And this is the story of how she found her voice again. The tiny girl who had spoken to a K-9 in court had done more than help convict a criminal. She had found herself. She had found her voice. She had found hope. And in doing so, she had given hope to countless others who would hear her story and know that even in our darkest moments, healing is possible. Justice had been served. But more importantly, a little girl had been saved. The end.